Wow, what a beautiful film. And you told me before that this is your first major...
This is my first feature. Yeah.
Your first feature film. Had you done a lot of work in environmental subjects before?
No, not at all, no.
Well, like, one of the advantages of being a documentary filmmaker, I think, personally, is you don't get to do the same project over and over. A lot of different films come to you, and you approach them fresh, new, and not knowing is great because as directors and producers, we represent you, the audience. What do you need to know? What don't you know? What is too much? Tell us how this came about.
Well, this, I mean, this, so.
Is it a crazy story like the film?
I mean, all of it's a crazy story. So I was actually, so you probably can't tell from my accent, but I'm actually French, right? I was born in Paris. My mother's French. And this ties into it. I actually got drafted into the French Army and served as a director in the French Army Film Division I mean, I was the last year of the draft, the French Army draft, and really, I got drafted because I didn't mail back a piece of paper that would have gotten me into the Army anyways. Had I been in France, but I was here. So, I mean, the French Army actually a lot of this footage was declassified by people who had helped me, I mean, who had served within the Army and helped me find a lot of this footage. But that's, I'm sort of sidetracking here. But basically, we were on vacation in New Zealand the week it happened as a French family with, my dad's American, right? So French-American family, exactly in July, you know, when it happened, and I was 8. And I remembered Greenpeace as, you know, I mean, my favorite animals were whales. These guys were my heroes as a kid, you know, mainly from the whaling campaign. But then I remember seeing this ship in the harbor, and he's like tilted. And then we go back to France, you know, in August. And then through September, I remember, you know, these French agents and the thing. But I'm looking at this from the perspective of a kid, right? And so it was years and years later, and you know, we had spoken about it, and we were talking about, you know, sort of what was that story really about? And it had, you know, I mean, in terms of the environment, I think, you know, we could both speak to this. I think this is such a good story for kids these days who haven't heard about even this era of environmentalism, and you know that was really attractive is that.
So how did you come back to it?
7 people really can cause you know, chaos and make a real difference. I came back to it because, you know, what's this book? Was it the book? It was the book. It's always been sort of in the back of,
we were in LA working on, we had a company in LA, and we were working on another project about American apparel. And this was something that I remember just kept gnawing at Edward. The story was just, it was, and I also think because it's partially a French story, like there was this gnawing inside of him. And our brilliant editor, Chris Dallas-Feeney.
Editor, this is a film that looks like it was not edited.
No,
and that's the highest compliment you can make, that it just flows.
Yes, so Edward had an idea about how he wanted to do it, and he, you know, if Lawrence Ellman is our UK producer at Docsville, and Edward had cut with Chris a sizzle, which is just like, if we were to make this movie, what would the look, tone, feel, vibe of it be? And I had come in, we were in development on some other things, and I tried to bring an ocean project to Edward, but I became involved because of my passion for another charity that I work with called Project Zero, and Edward and Chris cut this sizzle, which then Lawrence was our producer on the American Apparel series. Lawrence saw it and was like, we are making this movie. So
we basically sold it in 15 minutes. I mean, I'd cut the sizzle.
I hate you.
And then, it was crazy.
It's an art.
Because no, I mean, so we basically, we had 2 days left from the American Apparel, just sort of days on the budget, so we cut the sizzle. We used the time to cut the sizzle, and I give it to. I don't know if I should say that, but so we give it. Well, I sort of zap Lawrence's call. We cut the sizzle really just for fun, with all of the sort of kooky energy that we put into the film. And Lawrence calls me back. I send it to him. He calls me back 15 minutes later. He said, I showed it to Nick Fraser, who's his partner, who used to run BBC's Storyville. And he says, don't send this to anybody else. We're making this movie. And that was, we finished it 15 minutes.
Wow. So
and he's like,
the
who's
footage
directing?
that was telling the story, was that a film that had been made by the French, or was it you that was making it to look like an old...
No, we shot nothing. I shot
Not
the
a recreation.
I shot the interviews, and that's it. Everything else was from, I think 70 different
Did you
movies.
pass out when you found that film? That was unbelievable. You wouldn't have the same film without all that.
The recreations are actually from 3 films that were shot in '85 and '86. One was in New Zealand, the TVNZ film. Then there are two other films. It's a mix of TV movies from the '80s, basically. But since the car rental company got the van back from the police and put it right back into circulation, so they shot with the actual van that the agents used, and then the other agents and the station wagon was also put back into circulation as a rentable car. So they shot with the actual cars in the actual places.
So the perpetrators of the bombing
Yep.
made these films?
No. So the people who made the films afterwards used exactly the actual vehicles that the perpetrators of the bombings were using or had used.
You can't make this shit up.
So what you're seeing is when the van's driving by, the van is driving by where the van, it's the actual van just in a recreation shot, in 1985
Fantastic.
and 1986. And sometimes the way it's cut is you look this way and it's one film, you look back, it's another film.
Doesn't matter.
And our wide shots from a third film, but it's all real footage. And then the underwater stuff, the guys, the commandos underwater putting the bomb on the boat, that's French Army training footage. That my friends at the French Army, who like same guys I served with just 20 years later, at the same desks. I walk in there, they're like, McGurn, American. I walk in, they're like, what can we do for you? And I'm like, I need all this recreation stuff. How about guys underwater blowing stuff up? He's like, I've got it. 35 millimeter footage. They went and he dug up the prints and then scanned it for us, which was amazing. And then all the submarine stuff.
And the characters. Films are made by great characters, and every one of those people. A casting agent couldn't have done better.
And there were more, but I had to make choices and not make it a 6-hour movie. But amazing people, truly.
And so, how did the producing actually go? Where did you get your funding, if you don't mind? Was there a big fundraising effort?
It's coming. That was Lawrence. If you were here, would be able to speak more to that. But it's Fremantle, EuropaCorp, Doxville. They put it together. So
That's great.
So
That's great.
It was really, really on their side. But
good. Do we have a question or 1,000?
I'm very interested in the
Hold on a second. There's a microphone coming to you.
Hello. Well, what a wonderful film. Thank you very much. I'm just very interested in the bomber who agreed to be interviewed. And I'm just curious about why you think he agreed to be interviewed and what his, ultimately, what his perspective was on what he had done. Because he showed some small remorse about the fact that someone had been killed. But I was just curious what you had learned from him.
I think, so Keister, I think in his he's been interviewed before, and everyone who's actually interviewed him really drills down on, you know, okay, do you feel guilty about Fernando? Do you feel guilty about, you know, like, and to some degree, he does feel guilty. I think but he was also a soldier on a mission, and the mission was truly flawed. But you know, this is a guy. This is what he does. Keister's name never came out. Actually, the way he came out publicly was, if you remember Edwy Planel with the mustache, was in Tunisia, giving some kind of lecture of some sort, and he gets a note under his door, and it says, "I have information about the Rainbow Warrior bombing." This is in the 90s, years later. Meet me at the bar at 10 p.m. Or 2200 hours, and it was actually Keister.
You will die.
And Edwy tells me, because Edwy introduced me to him, and Edwy said, "Oh man, what am I gonna? Another guy just like meet me at the bar at 22. I'm not gonna do this." And then he's like, "But it's Rainbow Warrior. Okay, I'll go to the bar." And it was actually Keister, and it was Keister coming forward. And I think, I think Keister's way of apologizing. And I think he really does carry it, and you see it. And I didn't push him. I didn't make the interview about that, because I think he does carry the guilt. But I think his way.
You can see that.
I think his way of you see it in that
You
look.
see
when
it,
he
you
says-
don't hear it.
Yeah, you can see it.
But I think his way of making amends was telling the story.
Yeah.
And he really, he sat down, and I said, "So you're a secret agent. What is that like? Tell me from the first phone call, and just take me through the story." And we said, that was a 4-hour interview where it really takes me like beat by beat, what it's like being, who he is, what it's like from the first phone call of like, "You're gonna blow up his shit, get ready," to all the way to the end. And I don't know that anybody's ever asked for that kind of detail, but that's sort of the approach I took for everybody. Is everybody's a participant in the story. There's no real opinion. I didn't want to,
You let us decide. And
Yeah,
you couldn't make this up. It's so crazy that it probably get rejected by a Hollywood, unless you've been approached already to make this a Hollywood story.
But I would say
This is the Hamptons. Any producers from out there?
I would say having been in development, and I worked in sort of feature development for a long time. The amazing thing with a documentary is that you can tell a story like this through multiple points of view. If you had to write this as a script in a classic 3-act structure, and it does follow a 3-act structure with a bombing in the midpoint, it does hold that structure. But I'd have to sort of artificially have, the early Greenpeace guys would be my main character that you met at the beginning, somehow be in New Zealand, and you'd just have to convolute the story. Whereas the beauty in telling the story as a documentary is like, they pass the torch and pick it up. And this is so much more flexible a medium than scripted filmmaking is.
That's another argument to have another time.
We'll
Another question? Yes, hold on. How long did it take?
2 years. Yeah, but
We have a slight disagreement.
A lot of time was spent to. Well, we had to wait for New Zealand to open up, so we had a 6-month break.
We had a COVID pause.
And then we finished the film 6 months ago. So it was
So did your COVID pause help you or hurt you?
help?
How?
Just give more time to think about it. It's if this were jammed into, shoot for 3 weeks, cut for 10 weeks, deliver. I think you'd be
Sure.
It's a very dynamic and complicated story, and you can see to the brilliance of Edward and Chris and their work of like how
and my composer.
the pace at which it moves. So I think that time for you, just based on our conversations, creative conversations, was really helpful because you could actually let the soup.
It doesn't seem complicated at all. No, I'm serious. It goes. It goes. And you never lose us. You never start saying, okay, what's going on here? And
I see places.
Do you
when
agree?
I watch it.
Yeah. Another question? Way up in the back there. Hold on a sec.
The guy you interviewed,
Which guy?
was there some concern that he would be charged with murder because he was part of a conspiracy that when activated, there was a murder?
Yeah.
Good question.
And the same for the Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, I would. I mean, the Secretary of Defense. You see his death. His death came pretty soon and sudden. I don't know that. I mean, how do you treat that as a soldier in? You know, I don't know that New Zealand would have. I think in the settlement, probably between New Zealand and France, they sort of said this was going to be.
Yeah, but we don't know the answer to that. and
I
it's a very
actually,
good question.
I actually don't know, and in that sense, it was pretty bold
Yeah.
and brave of him to come forward.
We had someone down here. Hold on one sec. We try to make our questions as far away from the microphone as possible.
Hi. First of all, absolutely brilliant movie. I just enjoyed it thoroughly. My question, you mentioned your composer. Also part of the success of the movie, I think that the music amplifies it. You know, it really gives it a character in different dimension. Was this music specifically composed, or you picked out already existing music?
So most of this is original music that he composed.
Wow.
It's, I mean, he's just incredibly talented, and we had a just an amazing working relationship together. But it was
The name of the composer?
William Surface. Sorry, that was.
It's all the bright light.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it's his first film. He'd never composed before. He sent me a sample of his work and said, "This is what I'd imagined based on your trailer." And I said, "This is absolutely incredible." We said we were going to go sort of 80s synth and sort of explored in that direction. And I think he made 60 tracks, and we pulled
great.
it all together. But he's a genius, and I
We
recommend
have
him
time
to
for
anybody.
one more question. Yes, the lady in the black and white.
There is a lilt to the way your storytelling. It's clearly journalistic, it's clearly serious stuff, but I think the part that engages us the most is that there's a humanity and a sense of humor to utterly deadly serious subjects. And I'd like you to talk about that approach, because it was not medicine for us. It was an incredibly serious story, delightfully told. So,
I think it's you know, trying to find the emotional amplitude, you know, and that you can go from opening up on a joke, you know, and a journalist sort of tripping over himself, and then go within 7 minutes to be in, you know, Patero telling me about his sister born with no skin. I don't think movies that convey a message need to be a lecture, and I think, you know, it's a fun medium, and it should be a fun medium. And I'd actually make the argument that you know, this is, you know, we should tell these stories in an entertaining way. And this is really wrapping it up to say that, you know, life is absurd in a certain way, and you can't take it too seriously. Otherwise, it sort of holds you back. So go out, be bold, you know, take some risks, and you know, I mean, ultimately, the guys on top could be a bunch of idiots, you know. So you might as well.
But as you say, you don't need to beat people over the head.
Right.
And I think the best political films are ones that aren't trying to convince you. You just decide for yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful film.
Vote for the film, so you know. Yeah.